Welcome to Commsverse. This session is called Microsoft Teams for Developers, an Introduction, and today we're presented for you by Yannick Reikmans.
Hi everyone, welcome to my session, Microsoft Teams for Developers, an Introduction. My name is Yannick Reikmans, and day-to-day I work as a cloud solution architect in Belgium with a broad focus on the Microsoft Cloud. I'm also an Office Development MVP, where I'm mainly active in the space of SharePoint and Microsoft Teams. You can find my Twitter handle and the URL to my blog on the slides. Feel free to reach out. I try to answer everything that comes my way. I have some delays in getting everything answered, but please just contact me. I will get back to you. Now, looking at the sponsors, we have to thank them for this great event. Without them, it wouldn't be possible. And a special thank you to Polly for providing me with this headset that I deliver the session with. A quick look at the agenda. I'll start with a small introduction, and then I'll start to check out what it means when we talk about Microsoft Teams as a service and Microsoft Teams as a platform. And lastly, I'll help you get started in your own journey to become a Microsoft Teams developer. It's always good to set expectations. So this is a level 100 session. It's an introduction into the extensibility points of Microsoft Teams to show you what you can build, show you some SDKs and tools and samples and templates that will help you. But I will not show you how to build it, and I will definitely not show you any code in this session. If this is not what you expected, there are four other great sessions going on at the same time, so you can still switch to those. I hope you stick with me, so let's go on with the session. So Microsoft Teams, let's start how it's positioned by Microsoft. So Microsoft Teams was a chat-based workspace bringing together people, conversation, and content. It's how Microsoft positioned Teams in the launch blog post in 2016. Now, the Wikipedia definition also adds application integration and video meetings into the mix. And as a result, it wasn't catchy enough for marketing, so they just simplified it to Microsoft Teams is the hub for teamwork. Now, more recently, we've also seen Microsoft use Microsoft Teams is a service and Microsoft Teams is a platform. But what does this actually mean? Looking at Microsoft Teams as a service, it's all about extending your own applications with functionalities from Microsoft Teams. So bring Microsoft Teams functionality into your applications. And on the other hand, we've got Microsoft Teams as a platform, where you extend Microsoft Teams itself and bring your applications into the familiar look and feel of the Microsoft Teams clients. Taking Microsoft Teams as a service, it's all driven by Microsoft Graph. That means that all interaction between your application and the functionality of Teams is done through APIs exposed in Microsoft Graph. Microsoft Graph exists for a couple of years already, so you probably know about Microsoft Graph, but here's just a quick recap. So Microsoft Graph is the one API endpoint to rule them all. It exposes the data within your Microsoft 365 environment through a set of APIs, enabling you to build applications that can interact with this data. So this is a major improvement over the different APIs for each different workload we used to have before, all with their own approaches and authentication. Microsoft Graph unifies that into a familiar set of APIs. Looking at the APIs that Microsoft Graph provides for Microsoft Teams, I split them up in two categories. The first one being the management APIs. The management APIs are there to manage resources that exist in Microsoft Teams. Resources in this context mean teams, groups, but also owners and members, as well as channels, tabs, and applications, and even shifts in Microsoft Shifts. They all, or most of them, support the standard list, create, read, update, and delete actions, and some have even more advanced actions available. These APIs, for example, would allow you to create an external application, like a provisioning tool, that collects information from the end users and provisions the teams with the correct configuration and resources available. On the other hand, there's the communication APIs. With these APIs, your application can participate in conversations that happen in Microsoft Teams. So your application could list, read, and send chat messages in Teams, group chats, and one-on-one chats, but also manage calls by answering and rejecting them, or by managing participants, muting them, and things like that. But also create and manage Microsoft Teams meetings itself. So create an item on someone's agenda with a Microsoft Teams meeting embedded, and even use the presence or read the presence information for users, knowing if a user is available or away or in a call or doing something else. Switching to Microsoft Teams as a platform, remember, this is where we bring our applications inside the familiar fabric of the Microsoft Teams clients. The Microsoft Teams as a platform is divided into 4 categories. Going from left to right, it's from simple and easy to build, install, and manage, to more complex open source solutions, and then ending with applications you have to build from scratch. Looking at the ready-made solutions, this is the Microsoft Teams store that's currently available. There are hundreds of Microsoft and partner applications already available in the Teams store. You just go into the store, select an application, and with minimal effort, you have new functionality available that can be added to a team or a group chat. The availability of these applications can be managed on a tenant level, so it's possible that you don't have all of these available in your own environment because one of your admins turned one of them off. Going forward, there's also the ability to integrate the Power Platform into Microsoft Teams. So you can embed a Power App as a tab in Teams or interact with Teams through the out-of-the-box connectors available in Power Apps and Power Automate. For example, in this screenshot, you can see that there is an email that gets sent out for an approve or reject. And once the message is approved, there will be a message posted into the HR leadership team saying that the review has been approved or potentially rejected. And using these connectors, everything gets posted into Microsoft Teams. The third category are the reference solutions, also known as the app templates. App templates are production-ready, community-driven, and open-source applications that are available on GitHub. They cover a wide range of use cases and come with a step-by-step installation instruction. But they do require some technical expertise, as you might need to compile the code yourself or create some resources within Azure. All of these solutions come with detailed documentation and support through the issues list on GitHub. Because of all the code that's made available on GitHub, if they don't completely cover your needs, you can customize them or extend them, or just use them as an example on how things can be achieved when building your own custom applications. You can see on the right-hand side a list of app templates that are made available by Microsoft and the community. So it's worth checking out before you start building things from scratch. Now, the bulk of this presentation is about custom-built applications, where you bring your existing or new solutions into Microsoft Teams. In this case, we take our application or service that exists, and then it needs to be surfaced in Teams through an interface. It's either a tab or a bot, an adaptive card, a messaging extension, a task module, or potentially just notifications. And it needs a backend. Most commonly used are resources on Azure, Microsoft Graph, SharePoint, Power Apps, and Power Automate to combine your application or your data with a backend and an interface into Microsoft Teams. Looking at those custom-built applications, they exist of 3 parts. The first part being the Teams app itself. The Teams app itself is a simple zip file. It contains 3 files, of which 2 are just color icons. So they're icons for your application. And the third one is the manifest file. The manifest.json file, we'll dive deeper into it in the next slide, surfaces the ability or the information that you need for your application to show in Microsoft Teams. It's combined with an app registration. So depending on the extensibility point that your application uses, you want to register your application within Azure Active Directory, potentially with the bot framework or even as an Outlook connector in one of the many online portals that Microsoft has. And then the last thing is your actual application logic, which is either a web application with some server-side or client-side logic, or just a web service that responds to queries that you send it directly. Let's dive into the manifest, because it's one of the most important parts of your Teams application, because it describes all the functionality that your application wants to inject inside Microsoft Teams. So the manifest, it describes the package name and the device permissions, but also the developer name and privacy URL, for example, and some localization information to tell you or Teams in which languages your application is available. You put in a name and a description, you provide some icons, and then you provide the functionality. The functionality is provided in the empty arrays at the bottom of the message or the manifest. For each extensibility point, this format is a little bit different, and I'll show you when we go through the extensibility points. One last thing to understand for custom-built applications is the scoping of your application. Now, a Teams app can be scoped to either team or personal. So it's either scoped to a group or just you. When it's scoped in the team scope, it can be used to collaborate in teams and channels, or it can be used to extend conversations in group chats. Looking at the personal scope, it's supposed to surface information specifically for you and just you that's relevant for you, and can be either shown in the left-hand rail, or it's a one-on-one bot that you can use to interact. One of the best examples here is the Microsoft Planner app. In the team scope, it shows you the tasks for that specific team, but in the personal scope, it only shows tasks that are assigned to you. So now that we've covered all the basics, let's check out each extensibility point. Starting with Teams tabs. Teams tabs are one of the most used extensibility points in Teams. In essence, it's just an embedded web page. So your web page gets loaded in an iframe right inside the Microsoft Teams client. Now, it gets its most functionality when you make your website or your web application Teams aware. You do this by integrating the JavaScript SDK for tabs. If you integrate this JavaScript SDK, it allows you to interact with the surrounding team and Teams client. Your web app knows or can request information about the team in which it's loaded, the membership of that team, the settings of the team, potentially even if it's a light or dark mode environment that it has to run in. So everything is provided by this JavaScript SDK. Teams tabs, they support the content page, which is the one that you see on the screenshot. It's the main page of your application, and it's the page that most of your users will see. In the personal scope, this is all that's supported. Now, in the team scope, you also have the ability to put up a configuration page. So when you add your app to the team, it will ask you to configure it, potentially provide a different tab name or some configuration settings. And there's also the removal page. When you remove the tab from the team, it pops up this removal page, most commonly used for requesting if the application can keep the personal information that it has stored on you, yes or no, and then interact with it. Now, the technology behind Microsoft Teams tabs is just web technology. So you can use whatever you want of web technology that you're used to. We see that most commonly uses Node.js and React, and C# with ASP.NET Core or C# with ASP.NET MVC. Developers coming from SharePoint that are used to the SharePoint framework already, since 1.9 and 1.10 of the SharePoint framework, you can also use that to build personal and team scoped applications. Look at the manifest. There are two parts in the manifest that is part of a Teams tab. It's the configurable tabs and the static tabs. The static tabs are the personal scope. You can see it here as well. So you have a scope personal, you give it a name, the content URL and the website URL of your static tab. While it is an array inside the manifest file, you can only have one personal scoped tab in one Teams application. The configurable tabs are those that are part of a team or a group chat. Those can you can have multiple inside the same manifest file. Moving on to conversational bots. Bots, all the hype as well, and the second most important or most popular extensibility point inside Microsoft Teams. Bots allow you to have an interaction with the system, not a human being, and ask it questions, get information, and things like that. In the backend, a bot is a publicly accessible web service. So when a user types some text right inside the Microsoft Teams client, it gets sent over to the publicly accessible web service where you process it and you provide the answer either just as text, as an interactive card, or potentially with a task module. These bots, using the bot framework v4, which is the backing technology, since 4.6, everything for Teams is built into the standard bot framework. These bots are Teams aware as well. So they will get context information about the team or the information from the user that's running the bot, together with the question or the information that gets sent over. If you look at the manifest for a bot needs to be registered with the bot framework, and then you get an ID. So you need to put it inside the manifest file. And then you need to describe the scopes in which your bot can be made available, being team, personal, or group chat. And then there's the command list. And you see here that a command list can be split up in multiple sections. So some commands can be made available just for teams and groups, and some other commands just available for personal and a group chat. So you can mix and match the scopes and provide different commands to different scopes. Then you've got the messaging extensions. They don't get enough love, in my opinion. They're very powerful. It could be very powerful to extend your Teams application, but not many people know about them. So I hope I can educate some of you and convince you that this is a good extensibility point as well. Messaging extensions, they come in 3 flavors, and they can be attached at 3 points. So in the search bar on top, on the message itself, and into the message compose area where you type your message. And they come in 3 flavors. The first one being the action commands. Action commands allow you to present your users with a model pop-up to collect or display information. So they get a pop-up, they get a form, they can enter information, and when they submit the form, this information or this content is sent over to your web service, and your web service can process it and respond by inserting a message into the compose area, or just inserting a message directly into the conversation. So these are action-based messaging extensions. They're triggered from the compose message area, the command box, and the messages, and they run on the bot framework v4, so the same technology that's used for the conversational bots as well. The second of those messaging, forgot about the manifest file. Looking at the manifest file, so it's a compose extension. You provide the bot ID, remember, because it's the bot framework v4 backing this as a technology, and you provide the commands as well. Within the commands, you have a type being action in this case, and then some parameters. And with the context, you provide where your info or your action-based message extension will be made available. Within this example of the manifest, it's only available within the message area. Second messaging extension is a search-based messaging extension. This allows you to query an external system. So for example, if you integrate this in the compose message area where you type your text, you can pop up a search field where you, like in this example, search an external system for reports that are stored in there. What it will return, or what your web service is supposed to return, is some preview cards that are available for a user to select, and then a full card to be entered right inside the message. These search-based message extensions can be triggered from the compose message area and from the command box on top, but they cannot be triggered from a message directly. Like with all messaging extensions, it's built on the bot framework v4. Looking at the manifest file, it's very similar to the action-based message extension, just the type it's changed to search. And then the last one is link unfurling. This is, we know about this functionality when you post in something to GitHub or to a website, that some nice preview card is rendered. So maybe you've got some line of business application right within your within your environment, within your company, that you want to render nicely as well when people post links to it. So in this case, you have to register your URL or your domain on which this messaging extension has to listen. And when this domain is pasted or typed in the compose message area, the information is sent to your web service, and you can answer with a detailed card providing more information than the standard website preview card. So it even allows you to add buttons like you see in the screenshot. Now, of course, this only makes sense in the compose message area, so it cannot be triggered from the command box and from messages directly. Looking at this, the manifest is a little bit simpler. It's just a type link and then the domains on which your web service listens and can provide more contextual information. We still have task modules. So task modules are the model pop-up, and from a technology point of view, it's a Teams tab in a pop-up. It can be invoked from tabs, bots, and from external via deep links. So you can share a link with a colleague, and when they click on it, they will get transferred directly into this model pop-up dialog. And within this model pop-up, within this task module, you can have custom HTML and JavaScript. You can put in an iframe-based widget like a Teams tab, or you can render some UI with adaptive cards. Talking about adaptive cards, so adaptive cards are a declarative UI, being a JSON object that just describes the UI that needs to be rendered. It doesn't do styling because this technology is cross-product, and because you provide what needs to be on the screen to the hosting application will just render the adaptive card with a look and feel that fits their main look and feel. So if you send this adaptive card to Skype, to Android, or to iOS, to Teams, or as a Windows notification even, it will just be rendered looking similar to everything else on that platform. There are 3 card types that are supported within Microsoft Teams, being the connector cards, which is Outlook connector cards. It's the older technology. Then there are some simple bot framework cards provided by the bot framework, of course. And then you've got the cross-platform adaptive cards functionality. If you still have to start with adaptive cards technology in your Teams application, you have nothing built yet, use adaptive cards. Don't do connector cards or the simple bot framework cards. Connector cards and bot framework cards are limited to their technology, while adaptive cards can be very cross-product and cross-platform, can be used almost everywhere. Adaptive cards, like we said before, can be used in connectors, bots, and messaging extensions. And then there's the last thing, being the webhooks and connectors. Looking at webhooks and connectors, you've got the first one is the outgoing webhook. With the outgoing webhook, users can mention your web service. So you go into Teams, you register your web service, and you give it a name, so that when a user goes into the chat or into Teams and types at your name of your web service and then types a message, everything that they type behind the @mention will get sent to your web service. Your web service receives that message, processes it, and sends a response. It can be either text, adaptive cards, or even a task module. One of the downsides of using an outgoing webhook is that there's no ability to use a custom configuration page and you also cannot package it as a Teams application. This means that when you want to use your web service in multiple places within your current environment, so in multiple teams or in multiple group chats, or even across tenants, you have to go into each team separately and register your web service with the same name and with the same URL to make sure that you can use it inside that specific team. There's also the incoming webhook. So with the incoming webhook, the technology is turned around a little bit. You go into Teams, and there you say that you want an incoming webhook. That way, Teams will create an exposed URL that can accept messages. So that means that Teams will have a URL available to which your application can post information, and that information will then be rendered by Teams inside a team or a chat. Like with the outgoing webhooks, incoming webhooks also cannot have custom configuration pages, and they cannot be packaged as a Teams application. Now, this is even worse because if you need this functionality available in every in multiple teams, this means that you have to register the incoming webhook in multiple teams as well, and you will end up with multiple exposed URLs that then can accept messages. So your application has to handle the ability for sending that information to more than one exposed URL in Microsoft Teams. Now, to alleviate this, there's also the Office 365 connector. This is a special type of incoming webhook. And this is where you register your webhook in the Office 365 connector portal. And this way you can have a custom configuration page, and this can be packaged as a Teams application. So this is the way to go if you want your webhook available in multiple teams and multiple channels in multiple places, basically. Looking at the manifest file, you've got the connectors array where you provide the connector ID that comes from the Outlook dev portal. And then you provide the URL to your configuration page, and you provide, as always, the scopes in which your application can be made available. So we got through all of these extensibility points in Microsoft Teams. It's a lot, and you probably want to get started with you've got great ideas on how to get started on your own application, and you want to integrate it in Microsoft Teams. So what do you need to get started? You can do everything yourself and write all of the manifest files yourself, create all of the code yourself. But luckily, there are some tooling that can make this easier for you. First of all is the Omen Generator for Microsoft Teams. It's a community-driven project started by Victor Whelan. And this Omen Generator for Microsoft Teams, if you run the command line tool, it's built on Omen, of course, just like the SharePoint framework generator is built on Omen, so you might be familiar with it. It runs you through a set of questions on what you want to build, and then as a result, it scaffolds the information, and it scaffolds all the files that you need to start creating your application. Like I said, it's a community-driven project, so but it's stable. It's been there for over almost 2 years, I think. This is the one that I suggest using. Now, since build last month, Microsoft has also made available the Microsoft Teams Toolkit for Visual Studio Code. This toolkit for Visual Studio Code aims to do similar things than the Omen Generator is doing, but it's very new, but it is built by Microsoft, so it's something to consider. And it's integrated directly into Visual Studio Code. Now, one of the downsides currently of this toolkit is the fact that it only scaffolds projects in JavaScript, and it doesn't scaffold all the extensibility points that you might need. So currently, the Omen Generator is the more mature one, and I still recommend using that one. Now, if you use the Omen Generator for Microsoft Teams, you might also want to use the Microsoft Teams App Studio add-in. Microsoft Teams App Studio is an app right inside your Microsoft Teams that you can install from the Microsoft Store, and it allows you to go to edit your manifest and create your application so that you don't have to do it all in the JSON files yourself. So it guides you through with a set of UI forms, asking you for your developer name, the name of your application, the URLs for your config pages, what functionality you want to expose, being a tab or a bot. And then in the end, you end up with your zip file that you can directly install inside of your Microsoft Teams environment in which you're running the App Studio, or you can download it and transport it into another tenant and install it over there. The Omen Generator and Microsoft Teams App Studio combined is a very powerful tool to start your Microsoft Teams development journey. Microsoft Teams Toolkit for Visual Studio Code is the new one on the block, and it will probably get more improvements over the next few months. It has the advantage of being from Microsoft directly, integrated in Visual Studio Code, and combining the functionality of the Omen Generator and the Teams App Studio directly into Visual Studio Code. So it's a little bit up to you which one you want to use. My preference is still the Omen Generator. Looking at the Omen Generator, it goes like this. So it gets you a lot of questions in the beginning. You start with Yo Teams, and it runs the Omen Generator. It starts up. It asks you for your solution name, where you want to put it, in which folder, the title of your Microsoft Teams app project. You have to enter your company name and some surrounding information. And then it asks you which features you want to add to your project. So a tab, a bot, an incoming webhook, things like that. You have to provide information for your Teams tab and your bot. You have to register your bot in the bot framework, provide the ID, and then it just runs through this set of questions. And when it's finished, so we'll wait a little bit, it will scaffold all the files, like you can see here, and it will install the necessary NPM packages for you to start building. And then you can run go build and end up with a packaged file. So you end up with both the zip file that you can use inside of your Teams and with the files that you have to store on either Microsoft Azure or your own hosting platform so that Teams knows where to find the information. Wrapping up, we talked about Microsoft Teams as a service, where we bring Microsoft Teams to our own applications, which is all done through the Microsoft Graph. And then you've got Microsoft Teams as a platform where you bring your applications to Microsoft Teams, which is done by using tabs and bots, cards, messaging extensions, webhooks, and connectors. This is a set of resources. When the recording is shared or when the slides are shared, these can help you get started with your own Teams development and your own applications. And that brings us to the end. So thank you for joining. If you still have questions, feel free to reach out. You can find me on Twitter and on my blog. There will be a Q&A afterwards in the breakout session, so you can join me there as well. So you can unmute and talk to me directly. There's still some time left now to ask your questions in the Q&A, and my moderator, Steve, will probably unmute in a minute to go, or Stephen will go unmute and talk through them so I can get them answered in here. If there aren't any questions, I still want to urge you to please provide any feedback on this session so I know how I did and how the event is organized. Feedback is very important for us as a speaker and as an event organizer to create better experiences for you next time. So, Stephen, are there any questions?
There are indeed. Thank you very much, Yannick, for that presentation. The first question is from Denny. The question is about custom-built apps and tabs. Is there no support for Blazor yet? And is there a timescale for Blazor support?
Well, that's a good question. Thank you. First of all, Danny, since Blazor is essentially just a standard web framework. It's very new, but it's just a web framework or web technology. You can already use Blazor in your Teams tabs now. It isn't that straightforward to get it done, apparently. But another MVP, Thomas Guls, he created a blog post and shared some code on GitHub, I believe, where he integrates or uses Blazor to integrate into Microsoft Teams.
Cool, thank you. And we've had a question from Rick. Rick asks, what would be good use cases for when to use the Power Platform and not custom development, in your opinion?
Yeah, that's a good question. So first of all, Teams tabs cannot be done using the Power Platform, except if you build a complete Power Apps or Power App to integrate as a Teams tab. And that's probably a question about skills that you already have. I would be when I have to do this, I will be more familiar by creating a website and web technology, then go into Power Apps and create a Power App to embed into Microsoft Teams. The Power App support to get the context of the team in which it's running is still very basic, but improvements have been announced at Build last month. So if you need more extensive integration, currently a Teams tab is the way to go, but Power Apps is getting up to speed in the, I guess, coming months. If you need to post simple messages or cards or things like that, the Power Platform with Power Automate is a very good choice. So you don't have to create a web service or host code. You can just use Power Automate to post the information or the cards inside Microsoft Teams. So that's, I think, my take on this.
Great, thank you. That's all the questions we've had. So we'll stop session at this point. If people would like to keep speaking and have a conversation with Yannick, he'll be moving across into the breakout area. I've posted a link to that in the Q&A, so you'll be able to click that link and in a few minutes over there. So thank you for watching and have a great day, everyone.
Thank you very much. Bye.